The Art of Packing.
The lesson is an extract from the novel Three Men in a Boat by Eng Ch. The novel is a humorous account of the author and his friends George and Carl during the holiday down the River Thames. The following extract shows the course of events on one of these days. I rather pride myself on my packing. Packing is one of those many things that I feel I know more about than any other person living. I impressed the fact upon George and Harris and told them that they had better leave the whole matter entirely to me. They happily agreed to my suggestion. This was hardly what I intended. What I had meant, of course, was that I should be the boss, and that Harris and George should potter about under my directions. There is nothing that irritates me more than seeing other people sitting about, doing nothing when I'm working. However, I did not say anything but started the packing. It seemed a longer job than I had thought it was going to be, but I got the bag finished at last, and I sat on it and strapped it. "Ain't you going to put the boots in?" said Harris, and I looked around and found I had forgotten them. That's just like Harris. He couldn't have said a word before I'd got the bag shut and strapped. And George laughed, one of those irritating, senseless laughs of his. They make me so wild. I opened the bag and packed the boots in, and then just as I was going to close it, a horrible idea occurred to me. Had I packed my toothbrush? My toothbrush is a thing that haunts me when I'm traveling and makes my life a misery. I dream that I haven't packed it and wake up in a cold perspiration and get out of bed and hunt for it. And in the morning, I pack it before I have used it and have to unpack again to get it. I had to turn every mortal thing out now, and of course I could not find it. I found George's and Harris's 18 times over, but I couldn't find my own. I put the things back one by one and held everything up and shook it. Then I found it inside a boot. I repacked once more. When I had finished, George asked if the soap was in. I said I didn't care a hang whether the soap was in or whether it wasn't, and I slammed the bag and strapped it. I found that I had packed my tobacco pouch in it and had to reopen it. It got shut up finally around 10 p.m., and then there remained the hampers to do. Harris thought that he and George had better do the rest, and I agreed and sat down, and they had a go. They began in a light-hearted spirit, evidently intending to show me how to do it. I made no comment. I only waited, and I looked at the piles of plates and cups and kettles and bottles and jars and pies and stoves and cakes and tomatoes, and felt that the thing would soon become exciting. It did. They started with breaking a cup. Then Harris packed the strawberry jam on top of a tomato and squashed it, and they had to pick out the tomato with a teaspoon. And then it was George's turn, and he trod on the butter. I didn't say anything, but I came over and sat on the edge of the table and watched them. It irritated them more than anything I could have said. They stepped on things, put things behind them, and they couldn't find them when they wanted them. And they packed the pies at the bottom and put heavy things on top and smashed the pies in. They upset salt over everything, and as for the butter, I never saw two men do more with butter in my whole life than they did. After George had got it off a slipper, they tried to put it in the kettle. It wouldn't go in. And what was in wouldn't come out. They did scrape it out at last and put it down on a chair, and Harris sat on it, and it stuck to him, and they went looking for it all over the room. "I'll take my oath I put it down on that chair," said George, staring at the empty seat. "I saw you do it myself not a minute ago," said Harris. Then they started taking rounds of the room again looking for it. They met again in the center and stared at one another. "Most extraordinary thing I ever heard of," said George. "So mysterious," said Harris. Then George got round at the back of Harris and saw it. "Why, here it is all the time!" he exclaimed indignantly. "Where?" cried Harris, spinning around. "Stand still, can't you?" roared George, flying after him, and they got it off and packed it in the teapot. The packing was done at 12:50 a.m. Harris sat on the big hamper and said he hoped nothing would be found broken. George said if anything was broken, it was broken, which reflection seemed to comfort him. He also said he was ready for bed. Jerome, George, and Carl were three friends who were trying to pack for their holiday down the River Thames. Jerome started the packing. It seemed a longer job than he had thought it was going to be. But he got the bag finished at last, and he sat on it and strapped it. Harris asked him whether he was going to put the boots in. He opened the bag and packed the boots in. Just as he was going to close it, a horrible idea occurred to him. Had he packed his toothbrush? He had to turn every mortal thing out now, and of course he could not find it. He put the things back one by one and held everything up and shook it. Then he found it inside a boot. He repacked once more. George asked if the soap was in. Jerome said he didn't care a hang whether the soap was in or whether it wasn't, and he slammed the bag and strapped it. Harris thought that he and George had better do the rest, and Jerome agreed and sat down, and they had a go. They began in a light-hearted spirit, evidently intending to show me how to do it. They started with breaking a cup. Then Harris packed the strawberry jam on top of a tomato and squashed it, and they had to pick out the tomato with a teaspoon. It was George's turn, and he trod on the butter. It irritated them more than anything he could have said. They stepped on things, put things behind them, and then couldn't find them when they wanted them. And they packed the pies at the bottom, and put heavy things on top, and smashed the pies in. They put the butter down on a chair, and Harris sat on it, and it stuck to him, and they went looking for it all over the room. George told that he put the butter down on that chair. Harris said that he saw him do it a minute ago. Then George got round at the back of Harris and saw it, and they got it off and packed it in the teapot. The packing was done at 12:50 a.m.